Hello friends, if you want to watch super hit movie The Beekeeper in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called The Beekeeper. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you, I am also going to give you all the information on which a platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, star cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so let's start. The Beekeeper is a 2024 American action thriller film directed by Ayer and written by Kurt Wimmer. It stars Jason Statham, Emmy Raver-Lampman, Josh Hutcherson, Bobby Naderi, Felicia Rashad, Gemma Redgrave, and Jeremy Irons. The film follows a retired clandestine human intelligence operative and his crusade for justice after his kind-hearted landlady becomes the victim of a phishing scam that steals millions of dollars from the landlady's charity. The Beekeeper was released in the United States by Amazon MGM Studios under Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Pictures on January 12, 2024. It received mostly positive reviews and became a commercial success by grossing $152.7 million worldwide against a $40 million budget. Plot: in rural Massachusetts, Eloise Parker is a retired schoolteacher living a lonely life, but shares a warm friendship with Adam Clay, a quiet beekeeper living in her barn. Eloise falls for a phishing scam that bankrupts her and steals her life savings, including more than $2 million from her charity. A devastated Eloise shoots herself. Adam discovers her body and is arrested by FBI agent Verona Parker, Eloise's daughter. After being cleared and released, Adam contacts a mysterious group called the Beekeepers to track down the scammers as he wants to exact revenge for Eloise's death. They trace it to a nearby call center run by Mickey Garnett. Adam storms the call center and burns it down. Mickey's boss, Derek Danforth, orders Mickey to kill Adam, who dispatches Mickey's men at the barn and amputates some of Mickey's fingers with a bandsaw. Mickey escapes and calls Derek, but is caught and dragged off a bridge by Adam, who threatens Derek over Mickey's phone. Derek informs Wallace Westfield, a former CIA director turned security director for Derek's tech firm Danforth Enterprises, of Adam's threat. Recognizing Adam as a former beekeeper, Wallace alerts current CIA Director Janet Harward, who dispatches Anisette, an active beekeeper, to kill him, but Adam repels Anisette's ambush at a gas station near Springfield and burns her to death. The beekeepers promptly declare neutrality. Wallace organizes an ex-Special Forces protective team led by Pettis and briefs them on the beekeepers, an elite, clandestine human intelligence organization that operates outside governmental checks and balances, tasked with protecting the United States and the global system, akin to worker policing and how beekeepers maintain bee colonies. Like worker bees, beekeepers technically continue to work for the organization until death, but Adam considers himself retired and views his pursuit of Derek as personal. Verona and her partner Matt Wiley, who have been investigating Adam's chaos, anticipate his next target is the 9-Star United Center in Boston, which oversees Derek's global scam call centers. FBI Deputy Director Jackson Prigg authorizes an FBI SWAT deployment to secure the area, but they are beat there by Pettis' team, who order them out. However, 9-Star executive Rico Anzalone's refusal to obey Pettis and evacuate the 9-Star employees causes confusion that enables Adam to incapacitate the FBI SWAT team, kill Pettis and his men, and interrogate Anzalone. Verona, Wiley, and the Boston Police Department arrest Anzalone and the 9-Star employees, but Adam disarms Wiley and escapes. Investigating 9-Star, Verona and Wiley learns that Derek is the son of Jessica Danforth, former Danforth Enterprises CEO and current U.S. President, who they fear Adam will kill next, owing to the behavior of worker bees to kill their queen bee if it produces an inferior son. Verona, Wiley, and Prigg join the Secret Service counter-assault team and Derek's mercenary security detail, led by veteran beekeeper killer Lazarus, to secure a party at the Danforth's coastal mansion, where Derek believes he will be safe as beekeepers would not harm close associates of the president. Adam sneaks in regardless and, after being spotted by Verona, fights his way through mercenaries and cat agents to reach the Danforths in their office, killing Lazarus in a brutal knife fight and injuring Wallace when he orders Adam to stand down. Meanwhile, Prigg confronts Derek, who admits to misusing Wallace's CIA algorithms to organize scams and rig Jessica's election by flipping the necessary swing counties in her favor. A horrified Jessica announces that she will expose Derek's crimes to the public, even if it adversely affects her position, prompting an enraged Derek to shoot Prigg and take Jessica hostage just as Adam, Verona, and Wiley enter the room. When Derek tries to execute Jessica, Adam shoots him, saving her life, and flees through a window. Verona gives chase and holds Adam at gunpoint, but ultimately decides to leave him. Adam retrieves his hidden scuba set at the beach and disappears into the sea. Cast: Jason Statham as Adam Clay, Emmy Raver-Lampman as Verona Parker, Josh Hutcherson as Derek Danforth, Bobby Naderi as Matt Wiley, Minnie Driver as Janet Harward, David Witz as Mickey Garnett, Michael Epp as Pettis, Taylor James as Lazarus, Gemma Redgrave as Jessica Danforth, Enzo Cilenti as Rico Anzalone, Felicia Rashad as Eloise Parker, Don Gillette as Jackson Prigg, Jeremy Irons as Wallace Westwild. Production. In August 2021, it was announced that Jason Statham would star in the film for Miramax and would also serve as a producer through his company Punch Palace Productions. David Ayer signed on to direct in May 2022. Principal photography ran in England from September to December 2022. Locations included Tyringham Hall and the Kingsferry Bridge. In preparation for the film's opening scenes, Statham learned several methods of beekeeping and interacted with real bees. Release. The Beekeeper was released on VOD and digital platforms on January 30, 2024, followed by a release on DVD, Blu-ray, and UHD Blu-ray on April 23, 2024. Reception. Box office. The Beekeeper grossed $66.2 million in the United States and Canada and $86.5 million in other territories for a worldwide total of $152.7 million against a budget of $40 million or less. In the United States and Canada, The Beekeeper was released alongside Mean Girls and the Book of Clarence, and was projected to gross $17 to $19 million from 3,303 theaters in its opening weekend. It made $6.7 million on its first day, including $2.4 million from Thursday night previews. It went on to debut to $16.6 million, finishing second behind Mean Girls. The film made $8.5 million in its second weekend and $6.7 million in its third weekend, remaining in second at the box office. It spent its first 8 weeks in the top 10 at the domestic box office. Critical response. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 71% of 181 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 5.9 through 10. The website's consensus reads, "Cheerfully undemanding and enjoyably retrograde, The Beekeeper proves that when it comes to dispensing action thriller justice, Statham hasn't lost his sting." Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 53 out of 100 based on 36 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave an average grade of B+ on an A+ to F scale. A review in The Guardian says the non-shooting scenes are rushed and both Rashad and Driver are underused, and describes it as a solid, low-stakes, medium-reward New Year's effort. Matt Zoller Seitz of Roger Ebert praised the film's various aspects, including its range of villains, but regretted, "It's a real shame that The Beekeeper isn't the righteous trash masterpiece that it keeps threatening to turn into." John Nugent of Empire magazine said that Statham is as gruffly convincing as he usually is, though it's 20 minutes before he's even allowed to kick any ass, but called the action scenes horribly inconsistent and noted that you do have to put up with quite a lot of stuff about bees. Imagine that one of the boiler room scumbags from The Wolf of Wall Street bankrupted Jason Bourne's mother. That's more or less the starting point of The Beekeeper. which stars Jason Statham as a wraith-like ex-commando who metes out Old Testament vengeance against tech bros who use the latest inventions to rob people online. Statham's character is named Adam Clay, an MMA upgrade of Clint Eastwood's The Man with No Name. We don't know anything about Adam except that he lives out in the country raising bees and selling their honey, and that he's played by Statham, which means he's no ordinary beekeeper. His best friend is an older woman named Eloise Parker, Felicia Rashad, who lives in the farmhouse near his and rents him space in her barn. According to Adam, Eloise is the only person who ever took care of him. Eloise makes the terrible mistake of responding to a phishing scam from a data mining company that empties her bank account as well as the account of a nonprofit she helped found, leading to tragedy. Adam trades his beekeeper uniform for commando gear and disguises and works his way up the criminal food chain, doing what the law won't. We don't know exactly how Eloise came to take care of Adam, much less precisely what he means when he describes her that way. It's to the film's credit that it never elaborates, just as it never elaborates on who Adam was before he became a super-duper extra-secret commando who has never been fingerprinted and exists outside of every known governmental structure and seems, from other characters' descriptions, to be sort of an agent of self-regulation for society. The film is the brainchild of director David Ayer, Suicide Squad, Fury, and veteran action film and thriller screenwriter Kurt Wimmer, who wrote or co-wrote remakes of The Thomas Crown Affair, Point Break, and Total Recall. It appreciates the virtues of its leading man, who appears to have come by his muscles honestly, and does everything from dialogue to martial arts to gunplay as simply as possible. Statham is the kind of leading man who makes you lean forward in your seat, and he's gotten better with age. This performance builds on his superb work in Guy Ritchie's Wrath of Man, which also presented him with the challenge of riveting an audience's attention while playing a character who was more of an idea than a person. Statham's matter-of-fact minimalism in The Beekeeper makes it all the more moving when Adam tersely speaks of how much Eloise meant to him, or waxes philosophical on the organization of the beehive and the necessity of ensuring a functioning society. There aren't too many action heroes who could deliver a line like, "I believe there's good in the universe," and not only make you believe that the character believes it, but that the film believes it. A word about the bad guys. It's genuinely impressive how well cast they are, especially considering their number. Standouts include David Witts as Garnet, the boiler room leader who personally bilks Eloise, narrating his conquest to a room full of junior vultures with the brio of a Tom Cruise-style 80s go-getter. Josh Hutcherson as the data mining company's vice president Derek Danforth, the spoiled, sleazy, coked-out son of the President of the United States, Gemma Redgrave. Jeremy Irons as Derek's boss, former CIA director Wallace Westfield, an exasperated cynic who seems as if he wandered in from Veep. And Taylor James as a braying wanker of a mercenary who brags that he once killed a guy like Adam and can't wait to do it again. They're all morally and or physically revolting. Derek looks like he's been marinating in oat milk, and Hutcherson reads his lines in that preppy teenage snot voice that a lot of trust fund boys never lose even when they enter their 50s. When James' character gets worked up while denigrating Adam, he spits misty plumes of saliva. Irons is dressed and lit to exaggerate the royal rotter look that made him so perfect in 1990s black comedies, psychosexual thrillers, and horror flicks. It's a real shame that The Beekeeper isn't the righteous trash masterpiece that it keeps threatening to turn into. There's a great pop hit in here somewhere, probably one that focused exclusively on Adam and the awful people he's going after. But the film is scattered and annoyingly glib at times. There's a well-acted but ultimately unnecessary secondary plot about Eloise's FBI agent daughter Verona Parker, Emmy Raver-Lampman, and her partner Matt Wiley, Bobby Nattery, who want to catch Adam and put him in jail, even though Verona's initial theory about his complicity is instantly proved wrong. It seems as if she should recognize him as more of a Dr. Richard Kimball type. The FBI duo has undeniable chemistry, but the buddy cop comedy riffing in their scenes undercuts Verona, who should be as furious about and focused on what happened to her mother as Adam is. Worse, Politically and philosophically, the movie wimps out in the end, in the way that a lot of vigilante action flicks wimp out, by reassuring us that the problem isn't systemic corruption baked into the national character or the human species, but a few bad apples doing bad stuff without their well-meaning boss's knowledge or approval. Even the most socially critical Hollywood genre films tend to lose their nerve in this way. They tell us that the problem is not systemic and purposeful corruption embedded in the marrow of our institutions, but anomalous people whose removal will restore things to their natural state of nobility. There was an opportunity to do something truly bold here, but the movie didn't take it. If there's any working actor who could literally as well as figuratively burn it all down and bring audiences to their feet cheering, it's Statham. Statham is ever the pro. One wonders if he's had enough training at this stage to make a dangerously good assassin for real. But it's all more of the same. His two non-franchise films of late showed how great he can be when afforded both a little more lightness, Operation Fortune, and a lot more darkness, Wrath of Man. And it would be satisfying to see him try something just a little out of the ordinary next. He works well with Ayer, who himself works better on a smaller, gnarlier scale, allowed more freedom to get nasty. His Suicide Squad remains a great-looking what-if disaster. There's a grubby, late-night appeal to his dialed-up trash aesthetic, and The Beekeeper mostly works because of it. Be prepared for a sequel. The Beekeeper as a movie is one of the most aggressive, relentless, and stupid films I have ever watched. It is a throwback to the 90s where films just had the most insane scripts and treated it as seriously as possible. Because the only way to actually get the audience on board is to commit to the joke, take it as seriously as possible, and dare to try and pull it off. And I'm happy to say that The Beekeeper does that extremely well. It never once tries to wink or act like it is in on the joke that is the script. Instead, it commits in a way that can only be described as the David Ayer style. To describe the style of David Ayer is a complicated task. On one hand, it's clear that Ayer has real, genuine knowledge of the streets due to personal experience. This street knowledge can be seen in every single film Ayer has ever been involved in. He showcases gang violence, corruption, and ordinary people in ways that not many other film directors are able to. But he always struggled to piece together the overall story. His films are like vignettes, implausibly put together by a tiny plot that struggles with pacing and emotional investment. You catch glimpses of a violent, tragic world, but it's not quite compelling enough to keep you in your head till the end of the movie. Bright, End of Watch, Street Kings, Sabotage, Suicide Squad, these are all gritty crime dramas that never quite breathe beyond the murky, dark lens that Ayer loves to shoot in. In Ayer's eyes, the whole world is dark, grimy, with truly garish splashes of color. Think the dark backdrop of Suicide Squad contrasting with Harley Quinn's bizarre outfit, or in this film, the use of gold colors mixed in with random splashes of purple or red. If I had to point out the signatures in an Ayer film, it would be bizarre costuming with garish colors, gritty, grimy urban landscapes, and loose characterizations that barely drive protagonists or antagonists forward. However, in The Beekeeper, all of this actually works. Statham's character is as simplistic and one-dimensional as it gets. He can kick ass, he is on the side of good, and he's out for revenge for an elderly black woman who literally gets about 5 minutes of screen time. For you see, this movie isn't really concerned about character development. In fact, it speeds through that, just enough to justify the next insane plot point and why the characters are behaving like they are. To illustrate that point, the dog which features in John Wick had more screen time and impact than the motivation for Statham's character, Adam Clay, to go on his killing spree. It's that kind of movie, and I absolutely adored it. To continue the John Wick comparison, the world of Beekeepers is nowhere near as intriguing as the assassin world of John Wick, but it does serve a different function, and that is to keep the insane plot developing even further. As you are probably aware, it is the Beekeeper's plot that truly sells the movie. The implausible leaps that this film takes is so ludicrous that it becomes fun. The action, too, keeps escalating, with a bizarre escalation of threats that keep getting more zany. Fellow beekeepers, gangsters, FBI HRT, Tier 1 operators, Secret Service, crazy cowboy mercenaries. Never once does the movie stop to explain nor further characterize these villains. They exist solely to up the stakes and be cannon fodder for Clay to beat down. He is also ridiculously inconsistent with how he kills or incapacitate people. At first it seems he is above using guns, but by the end of the movie, he has no issue with using them. The rules in this movie are just tossed aside for whatever purpose the plot needs, much like the side characters, who barely rate any mention. Even the villain, played by Josh Hutcherson, is too boring, bland, and obviously a take on Gen Z tropes warrant any interest. Even when it comes to the rules of filmmaking, there are several strange goofs that puzzle me, such as a scene where the background of two characters talking is extremely distracting due to the actions of the extras in the back, or the color grading of the film, which veers from ugly dark colors to excessively bright locations with a very obvious yellow tint. Nothing really stood out visually either. The framing of every shot was relatively bland, the action was serviceable, but in a fun, iconic Statham way, and the music definitely did not impress either. While it may seem like I am saying that this film is very vanilla, it is not to the detriment of the film. It's one of those perfectly serviceable action films with no illusions about what it is. And for that lack of pretension, I actually admire the fact that it knows it fits squarely in the B-action movie category and is unashamed of itself. Much like those trashy, fun, silly action movies in the 80s, where a man goes on a killing spree just because he happens to be the right man in the wrong place and time, The Beekeeper is slotting itself right in that genre with aplomb. Things just keep escalating, and the stakes keep getting higher, and whilst it makes no sense as to how one solitary black woman who took her life due an online scam led to the conclusion of the movie, it sure was fun along the way. Watch this movie with your friends and a couple of drinks, and it promises to be a good time. A scene to recall. When Adam Clay decided that subtlety was out of the question, walked right up to a squad of FBI HRT operators and just incapacitated them singe-handed, whilst regular FBI agents nearby took no notice of this insane rumble literally meters away until one of these poor cops was slammed on a car. Honestly, how did they not notice multiple gunshots, yelling, screaming, punching, and kicking? But as I've clearly stated in the review above, these kind of questions are not the ones you should be asking in a movie as dumb as this. The Beekeeper, review The Beekeeper, is the best kind of bad movie, which is to say, it's the sort that puts entertainment ahead of pretentiousness, embracing the laughter sure to accompany such an unapologetically stupid, ultra-violent premise. Starring Jason Statham in what feels like a parody of Jason Statham movies, this conspiracy-fueled action showcase tortures its central metaphor until it can only be seen as a joke, featuring the transporter star as ruthless, retired government assassin turned benevolent beekeeper Adam Clay, who's pushed back into berserker mode after a fishing attack targets the kindly old woman from whom he rents a barn. There's much talk of kicking the hornet's nest and protecting the hive. Never mind that bees and hornets are separate species entirely, as Clay traces the culprits responsible for draining Eloise's accounts as far up the chain as necessary, which, in Ayer and screenwriter Kurt Wimmer's overactive imaginations, reaches all the way to the White House. Depending on your appetite for cockamamie conspiracy theories, that conceit is either the dumbest or most brilliant thing about The Beekeeper. Engineered in such a way that partisan American audiences can indulge their distrust of recent U.S. leaders, the movie features characters who could be variously interpreted as proxies for Bush, Hillary Clinton, Hunter Biden, and the Trump clan. Meanwhile, Statham sticks to his brand, playing yet another variation on the bald-headed battering ram we've come to associate with the star. It's more than a little absurd that a cold-blooded killer would turn in his kill-whomever-you-please beekeeper status to keep bees. How many ex-Navy SEALs have dedicated themselves to raising seals? And yet, such half-brained plotting is meant to suggest that Ayer and company don't find it necessary to waste their energy on backstory or psychology. The Beekeeper arrives in a post-John Wick world where a dead pet can trigger a killing spree. That style-first franchise feels like a direct reference to the movie's most over-the-top action scene, in which Clay's even crazier successor, played by Megan Leigh in high heels and a shimmery pink trench coat, opens fire on a gas station. Ayer does a more than decent job directing the action scenes, which is what matters most with such a witless genre entry. Squads of goons carrying enormous guns line up for Statham to take on one at a time. Once he's decided to protect the Hive, but oddly, not its queen/president, Clay has no qualms about killing whoever steps in his way, whether it's the pros who answer to CIA honcho Janet Harwood, British actor Minnie Driver, or a grizzled mercenary like Lazarus, Taylor James, who's offed a beekeeper before and relishes the thought of swatting another. We're meant to be rooting for Statham's bug-brained vigilante, and yet, by the film's climax, in which he bursts in on the American president with gun drawn, it's hard not to be reminded of the scene 3 years and 6 days earlier, when self-appointed heroes from groups called the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers violently took matters into their own hands. Maybe trusting the fate of our democracy to a renegade beekeeper isn't the ideal solution this movie would have us believe. January has a reputation for being the dumping ground of Hollywood, and I don't think there's a more apt way 2024 could prove that than with The Beekeeper. David Ayer, best known as the director of Suicide Squad, 2016, pulls together a heavy-hitter cast for one of the most generic and mind-numbing action movies I've ever seen. Jason Statham stars as Adam Clay, aka the Beekeeper, who embarks on a revenge quest after a group of internet scammers led by Derek Danforth, Josh Hutcherson, trick old people into giving away their money. The daughter of the woman Adam is seeking to avenge is an FBI agent, Verona Parker, Emmy Raver-Lampman, who is also leading her team to track down the cyber scammers. Read more Lobster Review, Paul Thomas Anderson, Magnolia. The first and most glaring flaw of the movie is in the writing. Statham's character is a one-man killing machine. While this is a common trait for action movie heroes like John Wick, or John McClane, Die Hard, Adam Clay has the charisma of a wooden board. We are intentionally left in the dark about pretty much everything about Adam, and we barely have a single conversation to establish his connection to the scamming victim he proceeds to slaughter dozens for. This leads him to be a hero who we don't care to root for, aside from the people he kills are bad. Luckily, the movie never fails to remind us of this, as Adam expresses to every villain in this film about how preying on digitally illiterate old folks is bad, which is painfully obvious. The problem is, considering how concerned about justice he kills a lot of innocent people. In his quest for revenge, he slaughters countless Secret Service, FBI, and SWAT team members who are simply trying to handle the situation like actual professionals. The movie attempts to deal with this by having Jeremy Irons explain that the entire organization of the Beekeepers is a secret society of badasses who don't have to obey proper criminal procedure because they are just that cool. While later events in the film prove why Adam's mission is now going against the Beekeeper agenda, he still just kills, in gruesome fashion, for the greater good, left and right. Action movies are filled with tension because you believe in the mission of the hero, and they're charming and fun to be around. The Beekeeper does the exact opposite. On top of my idealistic conflicts with the hero, let's just talk about the name. Beekeepers? Really? Every character in this film treats this name with the same weight as Voldemort in Harry Potter. Statham spends half this movie without a shred of irony, talking about protecting the Hive and other such things. Every bee-related line is side-splittingly funny. It's genuinely hilarious how seriously this movie takes itself. This also extends to the villains, who feel like what older Gen Xers and boomers think internet scammers are like. The call centers are decked out in tons of neon lights, and the bosses are cowardly, influencer-like crypto bros. It even goes so far as to include a scene where a man begs for his life to Adam with NFTs, and another where a man wears a suit jacket that says GOAT all over it. Sure, these scammers are bad dudes, but when they're constantly being talked at by holier-than-thou Adam, I felt like the movie was one step away from launching into the type of kids these days rant your grandfather goes on when he sees you on social media. The scam run by the villains of this movie is so cartoonishly basic that I struggle to believe even the most digitally illiterate people would fall for it. The movie's social media and tech focus is truly that surface level. The film's third act leans into how the scam money went to funding a presidential campaign. It also gives this already machismo and technology-bad revenge tale a half-baked MAGA-like political edge. At an hour and 45 minutes, The Beekeeper flies fast between action set pieces that rush through an already incomprehensible and stupid plot. I'd take bigger offense to this if every single line of dialogue is either painfully dry or hilariously stupid. Every exchange in this movie is that bad. Unfortunately, The Beekeeper's action really isn't much better. The cinematography in these scenes is so choppy that it's hard to follow what's going on. When you manage to keep up, you get extremely cookie-cutter fight sequences that are occasionally broken up by absurd what-the-hell moments of either impracticality or brutality. While some fights are enjoyable if you turn your brain off, they fail to captivate the way the 1.5 million other films in this genre do. The Beekeeper lives up to the action movie genre in terms of quantity. In terms of quality, however, it continues to fall short. The Beekeeper is a hilariously bad film. Serious nearly to the point of parody, this self-righteous film is a sloppy revenge fantasy designed for people with Punisher stickers on their safe of assault rifles they'll never actually use. It's an absolute disaster from start to finish, with many moments that prove it's so awful it's funny. It was only a couple of months ago that I completed The Equalizer series, and despite all my criticism in terms of the performative goodness of these protagonists, I had enjoyed my engagement with those films. After all, they make you feel angry through several obnoxious characters, let the anger accrue, and then provide you catharsis when these characters meet retribution at the hands of the protagonist. You can have disagreements, reservations, but these films are mostly a culmination of moments. Hence, moments are rewarding. The Beekeeper, like The Equalizer, has a screenplay committed to stylish violence, but also, unlike it to a degree, is self-reflexive. Jason Statham is limited in his acting abilities and doesn't have the charm of Denzel either, but he is seasoned in his punches, having done mostly this type of cinema. Nevertheless, this type of cinema has exhausted its foundational mythology. The myth of a ghost with a violent past who shouldn't be awakened lest you experience his wrath upon you. The challenge doesn't lie with a story repeating itself. The challenge lies in the method of storytelling, and most importantly, the set pieces. These are the avenues in which the genre is being stretched to its creative optimum. Allow me to explore where The Beekeeper sweetens and where it stings. Adam Clay, Jason Statham, spends a quiet life as a beekeeper and as a tenant to Eloise Parker, played by Phylicia Rashad, a retired schoolteacher. He helps her in odd jobs, and she takes care of him like a doting guardian. Clay feels at home. One day, Eloise gets robbed of all her savings and a charity fund she was a signatory to in a phishing scam. Having lost over $2 million of money that people trusted her with, she kills herself. Clay takes this personally and begins to hunt those engaged in phishing that abated Eloise's suicide. Meanwhile, Eloise's daughter, Verona, an FBI agent played by Emmy Raver-Lampman, informs that the FBI has been searching for the group of scammers for quite a while. The knife fight in the sequence is smart and gripping. David Ayer makes one of his intelligent choices in the sequence by establishing that Adam Clay is only a man, and the affirmation has a comic appeal to it. What appears to be a battle of equals only stops being so because Clay uses his opponent's disability to his advantage. But this small sequence merits Lazarus's claim that he had once killed a beekeeper, but only due to sheer luck and at the cost of one leg. The exposition deserves its spin-off. At the same time, the mythology of the beekeepers can also be exploited across industries for their spin-offs. Would I not love the Indian beekeeper fighting against the power elite because the system has malfunctioned? And by malfunction, I do not mean economic corruption, but communalism and institutionalization of hatred. While my democratic senses do not sit comfortably with the idea of a state agent turned vigilante outside the system, in no way different from superhero mythologies, The Beekeeper remains enjoyable due to the simplicity of its narrative. Here's an angry hero who lost someone, so he will kill whoever caused it. and there aren't many external agents to influence the circumstances and/or choices. That being said, Verona sticks out like a sore thumb as a character who doesn't contribute much apart from prettiness. Emma acts terrible enough for Jason Statham to appear as the better performer of the two, and her character seems to be written without enthusiasm. So much so that there is absolutely no effect of grief to be seen on screen for a daughter who lost her mother. Plot. In The Beekeeper, one man's brutal campaign for vengeance takes on national stakes after he is revealed to be a former operative of a powerful and clandestine organization known as Beekeepers. When a movie is called The Beekeeper, you're probably expecting lots of bee-related puns in my review, and you'd be right. I'm not sorry either. Jason Statham is back in what is arguably one of his best ever roles as a beekeeper called Adam Clay, who looks after bees but also works for a shadowy government agency where he protects the hive. As you can tell from the trailers, one of Clay's elderly friends has her life ruined by scammers and ends up committing suicide. As she is one of the few people who looked after Clay in his life, he vows revenge and will stop at nothing to make the scammers feel his sting. What ensues is Statham punching, stabbing, kicking, and shooting his way through the villains, and we're cheering him along the entire time. Scammers are the lowest forms of life and deserve everything they get, making this movie the ultimate in wish fulfillment. The script has some wonderful puns, with the highlight being "to be or not to be," with Clay responding with "I'll take option B," which had our audience in hysterics. This clearly isn't a movie that takes itself too seriously, which makes it all the more fun, feeling like a throwback to classic action cinema. Josh Hutcherson is wonderfully slimy as the main antagonist who runs all the scam companies, and Clay has him in his sights for extermination. Jeremy Irons is a little underused, and I wish he had more to do, but he isn't quite the character I expected from the trailers. Directed by David Ayer, we get some unbelievable action scenes and almost too many awesome moments to mention. However, when Clay goes to burn the call center down, I was practically jumping out of my seat with glee. At an hour and 45 minutes, it's well-paced and never dull, giving the audience exactly what we're there for. The final fight scene with the South African henchman delivers the goods and is Statham at his brutal best. He remains one of the last tough guys in modern movies, and he's always believable in these kinds of roles, as you would never want to be on the receiving end of one of his punches or kicks. In terms of flaws, you could say that Statham is playing his usual invincible badass, where he rarely gets injured, which does take away some of the threat, but he does get a few wounds, causing him to briefly flinch. Overall, The Beekeeper had me buzzing by the time the end credits rolled, as it's action-packed, filled with a few bee-related puns and Statham in his best role in years. I hope we get a franchise out of this, as it's the kind of ridiculously entertaining action picture we don't see so much anymore, and Statham is perfectly cast. Tweet: in an age of streaming services and diversification of content platforms, old-fashioned distinctions like B-movies or straight-to-video matter less from an economic perspective. They're still pretty handy as an indicator of quality, though, and this might be one of the few ways that The Beekeeper doesn't disappoint. Jason Statham's mid-market action history includes films involving Luc Besson, John Carpenter, and Uwe Boll. That's the ones by auteurs whose output, while sometimes sparkling, is most likely to see Wev as something used to collect dust. He's enough of a draw to offer support to action movie retirement package franchise, The Expendables, and the naked physics of filmmaking are diagrammatically applied in works like Crank and The Mechanic. If you enjoyed any of these, then The Beekeeper will probably suffice. If that seems like faint praise, then understand that it's intentional. David Ayer wrote Training Day, and that was a film rooted in some tremendous performances and Antoine Fuqua's direction. Ayer's own directorial efforts have been a somewhat mixed bag. Harsh Times and End of Watch both had something to say in their flashy violence, but Fury came closer to signifying nothing, and Suicide Squad seemed to establish that Ayer could convince with a couple, but a crew diluted things too far. It seems that a single protagonist might not be enough for him either. but I won't honey words too much in saying that if Ayer's got a sweet spot for filmmaking, this isn't it. Statham's usually a convincing action protagonist, but there's something about the choppiness of its cuts that makes it all seem a bit nonsensical. Decisions in production design, especially the scam call centers that start proceedings, seem intent on allowing a sort of neon murk that would suggest dim recollection of the tech noir of the Terminator, even without one of them featuring a high-end collectible of the endoskeleton crushing a skull. That kind of lurid palette can work really well. It's one of several things that reminded me of Renfield in this, but frequently it seems like design decisions and filters have been applied, not to say anything but to replicate something else. I say that the action makes things seem nonsensical, but to be clear, the words are well in front. Those words are by Kurt Wimmer, who appears to have taken large chunks of the idea of law-abiding citizen and reframed it to reflect the ever-changing zeitgeist of the empty-headed, vaguely right-wing revenge fantasy. The beekeeping thing, see, is an expository metaphor, and I know this because at one point a character describes society as not unlike a beehive. Someone also says that taking from an elderly person is as bad as stealing from a child, which is a line delivered with all the passion and intensity of a request for a cleanup on aisle 6. While Law-Abiding Citizen was basically a death wish remade to borrow from Saw, the Beekeeper takes that frame and squeezes it into the vein of a Nobody or a John Wick. There's a mention of Goodfellas, and the high-energy rip-off merchants owe a debt, possibly literally, to the Wolf of Wall Street. There are two broad classes of American crime film. Those from the left treat it as a differently failing form of capitalism. Those from the right treat it as the system protecting those it shouldn't. The Beekeeper is so massively of the latter that even if it didn't actually have someone say they had to choose between the law or justice, there might have been clues in its very thinly veiled analogs to Hunter Biden and Hillary Clinton. That's notionally one of the surprises, by the way, that crime and politics are often close coupled. Jeremy Irons turns up as a former CIA director, and for a moment, like an idiot, I thought there might have been something in the parallels between espionage and organized crime and their systems of silence and the whole business of being undercover and what James Jesus Angleton called the wilderness of mirrors. We do get a corridor lined with them, but beyond cruelly retaining a blowout that would make any cinematographer wince, the intent is not to have parallels with Versailles and the French Revolution or the injustices of armistice, but to have Jason Statham really stab up a guy and maybe steal his leg. That guy is a South African mercenary, played by Taylor James, who appears to have been drawn from memory from Schwarzenegger's Commando. As the rampaging Beekeeper is tracked by the FBI with dialogue that includes the actual line, "like a beekeeper, beekeeper," which should probably actually be, "like a beekeeper, beekeeper," the hardest thing to keep track of is which other better movies you are being reminded of. Megan Leigh turns up after a sequence that might be meant to recall the Suicide Girls' telephone exchange aesthetic of John Wick's weird rockabilly underworld, but resembles instead a corporate training video. Her character's primary purpose is to leave a clue behind after a painful text message exchange and an explosion that recalls RoboCop. Oh, and to have part of her body stolen too, which could have been a recurring theme if the entomological metaphors had been extended beyond borders, so clumsy, one wonders if they're hexagonal by accident. Minnie Driver turns up for a bit. Josh Hutcherson is a sort of slightly bigger bad. Because this was filmed in part in the UK, a bunch of folk who've been in EastEnders turn up with somewhat American accents. That's foregrounded in a conversation between Statham and Emmy Raver-Lampman, who detects a bit of British Isles in taciturn mumblings. She's an FBI agent, and among the film's many liberties with what seems like operational sensibility or questions of jurisprudence, her investigation is almost a through line. That's not because it requires one of those red-stringed webs to track, but because it plods doggedly from A to B. There's a credited law enforcement consultant, and I will spare their blushes because I actually suspect that there's a more credible depiction of tactics and techniques in the Paw Patrol movies. You'll find yourself asking, why are they using a knife? And I don't just mean within the film. Their repeated incongruous presence in the hands of people who should know better doesn't even give satisfying fight sequences. There's an actual plot hole in a hole not being covered up, and I'm astonished that in all the movies, it would seem Kurt Wimmer half remembers, none of them have featured even the most basic precepts of bodyguarding or VIP protection. What's worst about all of this is that it's not even very bad. I'm no fan of so bad it's good, but Blackbird was so staggering in its tone that it looped round and became a piece of outsider art like The Room. Complaints about right and wrong, not being fashionable are definitely older than me, and I strongly suspect that someone was angrily putting stylus to wax about the unjust protections of the Code of Hammurabi. When some phishing scam hacker group disturbs his nest, he goes wild like a bee. And, oh, well, clearly it's not that easy to describe everything in terms of bees. Credit to you, Ayer. Punches everybody. A lot. Then burns down the hornet's nest and goes looking for the next one. I made the decision not to see the movie's trailer since I wanted to go see it without any expectations. My goal was to maintain the tension in an orderly manner. Let me tell you, it was worthwhile. It's a good thing I skipped the trailer. I now understand, whether literally or figuratively, that bees and their caregivers are the most crucial component of our ecology thanks to this film. You should be aware of what to anticipate because Jason is the movie's main character. It sounds just like Liam Neeson saying, "When I find you, I will kill you." In this film, Jason says, "Yeah, I'm a beekeeper. I keep bees," in a similar tone. Now, the reason I adore this movie so much is that it highlights cybercrimes and phishing frauds. I firmly believe that elderly folks should see this film so they can gain some knowledge about cybercrimes and how they might fall victim to them without even recognizing it. David Ayer is the director of the action thriller The Beekeeper 2024, which was written by Kurt Wimmer. Along with Bill Block, Chris Long, David Ayer, and Kurt Wimmer, Jason Statham produced it. The protagonist of the film is Adam Clay, a former beekeeper agent whose landlady fell for a phishing scheme. Jason Statham, Josh Hutcherson, Bobby Naderi, Felicia Rashad, Jeremy Irons, and Emmy Raver-Lampman were among the actors who starred. Mrs. Eloise Parker, a retired schoolteacher, lives alone in her barn in Massachusetts, although she has a renter who utilizes the barn to produce honey. Tenant of Mrs. Parker's barn, Adam Clay, is a beekeeper in life, though not in the strict sense. Mrs. Parker extends a dinner invitation to Adam on that fateful day as a way of saying thank you for being a wonderful tenant. Adam agrees to come over for supper after she extends her invitation. Over the course of the day, Mrs. Parker became a victim of a phishing scam and was defrauded of over $2 million, the most of which belonged to a charity that she assists in overseeing. She used a gun to end her own life since she had no idea what to do or how to get the money back. Adam discovers her dead when he returns from his earlier promise to have dinner with her and gives her a jar of honey. In a strange turn of events, Verona, the FBI agent's daughter, discovers Adam in her mother's house and takes him into custody for murder. Verona later learned, following a thorough investigation, that her mother committed herself after being duped. Verona informed Adam about the group that had stolen from her mother once Adam had been freed. Adam then asks the Beekeepers, an enigmatic group from his past, for help in finding the con artists in question. Then he unleashed a furious tirade. Will Adam investigate this further? There is a lot of fast-paced action and talk about bees in the movie The Beekeeper. It is simultaneously gratifying and irritating. Should you possess an aversion towards unfairness, deceit, and taking advantage of the vulnerable, you will feel something when you watch this movie from the very beginning. This film has the intensity of The Equalizer mixed with John Wick. The bogeyman is a lone soldier on a rampage. Add to that an exciting and enlightening ride. The entire 105 minutes of the film featured Jason doing what he does best in his films, a ruthless, insane, fast-paced, and brutal experience. He played a somber, grave, vicious, and essentially ghostly role in this film. In a matter of minutes, he enters and exits, leaving behind flames and devastation. This movie's cast is merely mediocre. Why? Because the performances of the supporting cast members were shoddy and amateurish. Jason Statham, Josh Hutcherson, David Witz, Jeremy Irons, and Felicia Rashad were the only characters that really caught my attention. I didn't realize the rest of the actors was in the film until the very end. Verona Parker, a character, let me down though. Her part was poorly constructed. Her persona lacked realism. She did experience grief and loss, but she did not grieve for her mother's passing. Nothing. She was annoying and had the worst character. The conversation was mediocre and insane, but the plot and writing were both excellent. It was entertaining to watch the plot develop. It was brimming with clever humor. It was enjoyable and entertaining. The way the scenes were arranged was superb. The pacing is perfect. It was a simple black and white film that moved quickly and had no superfluous plot or intrigue. The action sequences were excellent. You could hear muscles rip, bones break, and if it was just in my head, I could feel burning flesh. The killings were satisfying, humorous, and bloody. Like me, you will adore this film if you enjoy action thrillers from the 1980s and 1990s that pit one man against the rest. Both the camera work and the cinematography were superb. I think every place that was selected for filming was great. It really helped to build the tone for the picture. I'm going to give this film an 8.8 out of 10. This film is not for you if you don't want corny action thrillers from the 1980s, but it is great for lovers of Jason Statham and the elderly. One of my favorite works of film criticism, which is no longer online, was published by Birth Movies Death about the career of Jason Statham, wherein the author discussed how the somewhat less than stellar actor's filmography has been a consistent and comforting presence in his chaotic life. With things being difficult, these movies were a presence in his life, as he regularly turned to them as he dealt with years of addiction and employment issues. The works of Jason Statham have a consistency to them, and while few of his films have achieved status as great films, besides Snatch, many of them have proven to be quite enduring and enjoyable. Transporter, Crank, Redemption, The Meg, Wrath of Man, and Spy are all enjoyable movies that use his screen presence well. Even if his films are somewhat forgettable or cliché, his works are dependable and comforting, given that audiences can be assured the newest Statham action film will be a solid and consistent time at the movies. This is true of his newest film as well. Few films have a premise more cliché, derivative, and ridiculous than The Beekeeper. This movie from director David Ayer, starring the great Jason Statham, is yet another of his high-octane action hero movies. Yet, as I sat in the theater watching the movie, I couldn't help but enjoy myself. Despite observing the poor cinematography during the daytime shots, the rushed character motivations, and the intense way the movie escalated from small-scale action to massive, over-the-top camp, I couldn't help but enjoy it. This movie should have been a cliché January action movie, but it's got an infectious and absurd energy to it. The movie follows the life of Adam Cliff, a middle-aged beekeeper who is renting a barn from an elderly woman living a pleasant life in rural Massachusetts. When her financial life is destroyed by computer hackers, Cliff reveals his history as a secret government agent with a very specific set of skills he uses to carve a path of personal vengeance and justice. As we discover, the Beekeepers are a discreet U.S. government organization that sends out nearly unkillable agents who are above the law to protect society in ways the legal system cannot. In this case, Cliff finds himself chasing a corporate conspiracy with links to Silicon Valley and the federal government that go far beyond his expectations. The path of destruction Statham carves in The Beekeeper is an absurd one, and possibly one of his most insane ones to date, outside of films like Crank 2. High Voltage. Ayer seems to be leaning into many of the tropes of Statham's persona, crafting an Equalizer-esque assassin who is proficient enough at killing with martial arts and household objects that he doesn't even bother using a gun until the finale. The film's absurdity also extends to its predilection with bees. The concept of a beekeeper is laid out philosophically in the film, with society being described as a hive in need of protection from the outside. The beekeepers are taught the importance of right and wrong and given infinite resources to accomplish any mission. Amusingly, the movie is constantly throwing out puns, factoids, and pretentious philosophical muses on the nature of bees as a concept, with one of the villains going as far as to quote, "to be or not to be." The movie is genuinely funny and benefits from how quickly the story escalates and becomes larger and crazier. Its somewhat reactionary approach to morality is certainly nothing new, given it's approaching the same moral questions Dirty Harry and Death Wish have both interrogated. What use is the law when it is incapable of creating order and justice? This is nothing new for revenge movies, though, and the novelty comes in the absurdity of the scenario. It is a curious work for Ayer, given his career to date. His screenplay for Training Day, followed by his solid work on End of Watch, Sabotage, and Fury, set him up to be a nasty and consistent action filmmaker, which fell apart after his infamous work on Suicide Squad, Bright, and The Tax Collector. The Beekeeper's pairing of Ayer and Statham is probably a safe career choice for him. Still, it is also a good opportunity to remind audiences of what he is capable of. His work here is uneven but nasty, funny, and colorful. All of the interior scenes in the film are beautifully lit, and his action staging is solid and creative. The Beekeeper is in all likelihood a forgettable film that will go into the bin of generic action movies produced annually by actors like Liam Neeson that exist to be a flash in the pan. However, a movie like this is a periodic reminder that boilerplate action has its moments, and films like this can serve a purpose. It is a serviceable action movie that takes a few extra steps to be funny and absurd when it could have remained reliably mediocre and still made its budget back. John Wick's influence on the action genre continues in The Beekeeper, a shoot-'em-up that finds Jason Statham in a Wick-esque scenario, aside from a few tweaks of minor details. Looking grizzled and worn, Statham, inhabiting the same badass screen persona from the last 20 years of his career, plays a former elite operative who's shaken out of retirement when bad guys wrong someone close to him. They unknowingly prompt an unstoppable killing machine named Adam Clay, who launches a single-minded mission to eliminate anyone involved, no matter how high up. As it turns out, Clay belonged to a tippy-top secret government program called the Beekeepers and worked with absolute autonomy to keep the system operating. Clay makes SEAL Team 6 look like pussies, a remark made by Jeremy Irons, who gives it more credibility than I can. The whole scenario and its mythology play like John Wick as a member of the Kingsmen, but its familiarity doesn't take away from its considerable entertainment value. From the start, the script by Kurt Wimmer, Equilibrium 2002, establishes the sympathetic stakes. They're not quite as triggering as John Wick's murdered dog, but it's close enough. Phylicia Rashad, known best for her role as America's mom on the now unwatchable Cosby Show, plays Eloise, a kindly schoolteacher who has befriended Clay, giving him a workspace in her barn on a vast property. There, Clay has built up the local flora with his knack for beekeeping, tending hives and jarring honey. To be sure, it's not just a cool name. No one's ever taken care of me before, Clay tells her sincerely. However, when phishing scammers persuade Eloise to relinquish every bank account she has, including $2 million for a children's fund she oversees, her shame leads to a hasty suicide. While it's tragic that Eloise has never heard of fraud protection, doubtless, everyone watching knows a senior citizen who has been preyed upon by a scammer. At this moment, we're all thinking the same thing. Get those fuckers, Statham. Sure enough, Clay resolves to come out of retirement and call on his old beekeeper connections to get intel on the scammers. After making short work of the security detail and detonating the call center that defrauded Eloise, Clay targets the rich hipster douchebag, Derek, Josh Hutcherson, effective as a twerp, who oversees a data mining operation. Derek's boiler room call centers and malicious software prey on vulnerable targets, and for reasons that are initially unclear, he's shielded by Wallace Irons, a former CIA director who knows Derek has little chance of surviving the one-man swarm he's unleashed. Meanwhile, Eloise's daughter Verona, Emmy Raver-Lampman, an FBI agent, attempts to find answers about Clay's identity and Derek's operation. Joined by her partner, Bobby Naderi, with whom she shares a chummy, pleasant dynamic, she believes Clay should adhere to the law rather than resorting to vigilante justice. "You have laws for these things until they fail," says Clay. "Then you have me." With lines like these, it's easy to imagine someone watching The Beekeeper and rolling their eyes throughout. Wimmer's dialogue can sometimes be clunky, even laughably bad, peppered with 80s brand one-liners and B-facts. But that's part of its charm, too. Clay says his mission is to protect the hive and refers to those in his way as hornets. Later, Verona calls him a queen slayer, a type of bee that attacks the queen when it fails to produce productive offspring. But perhaps that's revealing too much. Elsewhere, the opening credits sequence is a montage of bees, hives, and world architecture that vaguely resembles hive cells. And throughout the movie, amid Statham slicing off fingers with a bandsaw and using a jar of honey to disorient an opponent, there's a message about the importance of bees in the ecosystem. In one of Irons' many speeches, his character observes, "No bees, no agriculture, no civilization." At least the filmmakers seem interested in embedding a mild environmental theme into the mind-numbing violence. Note, The Beekeeper's trailer featured a line about honey being flammable. It is not. Enough reactions debunking this claim seem to have inspired the line's removal from the movie. With The Beekeeper, David Ayer has directed his best effort since 2012's End of Watch, delivering a straightforward action yarn that makes excellent use of its star. Statham's output lately has been dominated by franchise sequels, Fast and Furious, Expendables, The Meg, The Mechanic, with too few exceptions like the underrated Wrath of Man, 2021, which contains a similar array of simple pleasures found here. Statham single-handedly taking down cybercriminals, mobsters, SWAT teams, private security, mercenaries, and the Secret Service with expert ambushes and hand-to-hand combat. There's even a dazzling sequence where his character faces off against the currently active Beekeeper, Amber Sienna, a maniacal punk armed with a minigun. No matter the scene, Ayer, cinematographer Gabriel Beristain, and editor Jeffrey O'Brien ensure a clear presentation of the mayhem, a departure from this director's occasional lack of clarity. Eloise Parker, Felicia Rashad, a retired schoolteacher, loses all her money at the click of a button as a sophisticated network of young hackers rob her of over $2 million. Her daughter is an FBI agent, Verona Parker, Emmy Raver-Lampman, but is helpless in catching these tech-savvy thugs. Enter Adam Clay, Jason Statham, a beekeeper by profession, who runs his modest business from Eloise Parker's rented garage, but is single-handedly capable of destroying the biggest and the most elusive fishing mafia that is out of the reach for even the most elite law enforcement organizations. The Beekeeper starts off with a bang, promising a heavy dose of slick action and a new kind of enemy who is young, smart, and commits their crime without using force or violence. But they destroy lives anyway. This premise is exciting and has immense scope to deep dive into a story about new age scams that have become a sad reality of our life. But far from going deep, The Beekeeper barely manages to even skim the surface. Director David Ayer and his writer Kurt Wimmer make no effort to explain the intricacies of how a group of young techies wipe off millions of dollars daily from people's bank accounts from a plush high-tech office and remain untraceable. Neither are they interested in showing us the scam itself in detail. It merely serves as a motivation and a reason for our man Adam Clay to unleash mayhem on the bad guys and go all guns blazing. Like most high-octane actioners, The Beekeeper too succumbs to preposterous and illogical happenings. However, the one thing that keeps this one fresh and brimming with entertainment is Jason Statham's solid kicks and punches and the novel action choreography by Gabriel Beristain. Right from the start, the action is the one element that remains unpredictable, even when the writing falters. The sweet satisfaction of a bloody revenge for those who have little regard for other people's hard-earned money is rewarding to watch. This keeps the narrative on track, even when most characters come across as bumbling stereotypes. Thankfully, the leading man Jason Statham doesn't seem to have lost his sheen. The actor can still pack a punch. The Beekeeper is a gripping action thriller for most part, with a fresh narrative of vengeance. A more pronounced emphasis on the crime and its execution could have made this stinging revenge drama far more lethal. Beekeeper is scheduled to be released in the United States by Amazon MGM Studios on January 12, 2024 premise. Adam Clay is a former operative of a clandestine organization called Beekeepers after his friend and neighbor dies by suicide. After falling for a phishing scam, Clay sets out to exact revenge against the company responsible. 3 cast Jason Statham as Adam Clay, 3 Emmy Raver-Lampman as FBI agent, Verona Parker, Josh Hutcherson as Derek Danforth, 4 Jeremy Irons as Wallace, West 4 Gemma Redgrave as president, Danforth Mini Driver as director, Howard 3 Fisher Rashad as Elo, Parker 3 Bobby, Neri as agent, Matt Y 4 Enzo Salenti as Rico, Anzalone Don Gillett as deputy, director Prig David Witz as Mickey Garnett production. In August 2021, it was announced that Jason Statham would star in the film for Miramax and would also serve as a producer. 5 David, assigned on to direct in May 2022. 6 Principal photography began in September 2022 in the United Kingdom. 7 In October, Statham shot scenes at Tyringham Hall in Tyringham. 8 Filming wrapped that December 9th release. Metro Goldwyn Mayer MGM acquired the distribution rights in the United States and some international territories in August 2022. 7 In February 2023, Sky Cinema acquired the rights in the United Kingdom for it is scheduled to be released by Amazon MGM Studios on January 12, 2012 for in conventional theaters and in Dolby Cinema and a Max 13 box office in the United States, and The Beekeeper is scheduled to be released alongside Mean Girls and The Book of War. Gross won $17.19 million in its opening weekend. Critical response on the review. Aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes. 71% of 55 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 58/10. The website's consensus reads, cheerfully undemanding and enjoyably retrograde. The Beekeeper proves that when it comes to dispensing action, thriller Justice Statham hasn't lost his sting. 11 Metacritic, which uses a Ayer assigned the film a score of 53 out of 100 based on 20 critics indicating mixed or average reviews. The Beekeeper movie review. Imagine that one of the boiler room scumbags from The Wolf of Wall Street bankrupted Jason Bourne's mother. That's more or less the starting point of The Beekeeper, which stars Jason Statham as a wraith-like ex-commando who meets out Old Testament vengeance against tech bros who use the latest in inventions to rob people online. Statham's character is named Adam Clay, an MMA upgrade of Clint Eastwood's The Man with No Name. We don't know anything about Adam, except that he lives out in the country, raising bees and selling their honey, and that he's played by Statham, which means he's no ordinary beekeeper. His best friend is an older woman named Elo Parker Fisha Rashad, who lives in the farmhouse near his and rents him space in her barn. According to Adam, Lowe is the only person who ever took care of him. The Lowe makes the terrible mistake of responding to a phishing scam from a data mining company that empties her bank account, as well as the account of a nonprofit she helped found, leading to tragedy. Adam trades his beekeeper uniform for commando gear and disguises, and works his way up the criminal food chain, doing what the law won't. We don't know exactly how Alo came to take care of Adam, much less precisely what he means when he describes her that way. It's to the film's credit that it never elaborates, just as it never elaborates on who Adam was before he became a super-duper extra-secret commando who has never been fingerprinted and exists outside of every known governmental structure, and seems, from other characters' descriptions, to be sort of an agent of self-regulation for society. The film is the brainchild of director David Ayer, Suicide Squad, Fury, and veteran action film and thriller. Screenwriter Kurt Wimmer, who wrote or co-wrote remakes of The Thomas Crown Affair, Point Break, and Total Recall. It appreciates the virtues of its leading man, who appears to have come by his muscles honestly, and does everything from dialogue to martial arts to gunplay as simply as possible. Statham is the kind of leading man who makes you lean forward in your seat, and he's gotten better with age. This performance builds on his superb work in Guy Ritchie's Wrath of Man, which also presented him with the challenge of riveting an audience's attention while playing a character who was more of an idea than a person. Stams. Matter of fact, minimalism in The Beekeeper makes it all the more moving when Adam Turley speaks of how much Ayoi's meant to him, or wax, is philosophical on the organization of the beehive and the necessity of ensuring a functioning society. There aren't too many action heroes who could deliver a line like "I believe there's good in the universe," and not only make you believe that the character believes it, but that the film believes it. A word about the bad guys. It's genuinely impressive how well cast they are, especially considering their number. Standouts include David Witz as Garnet, the boiler room leader, who personally built Solo, narrating his conquest to a room full of junior vultures with the brio of a Tom Cruise style 80s go-getter. Josh Hutcherson as the data mining company's vice president. Derek Danforth, the spoiled, sleazy CED-out son of the president of the United States. Jimmer Redgrave, Jeremy Irons as Derek's boss. Former CIA director Wallace Westwell, an exasperated cynic who seems as if he wandered in from Vepp and Taylor. James as a brainwanker of a mercenary who brags that he once killed a guy like Adam and can't wait to do it again. They're all morally and/or physically revolting. Derek looks like he's been marinating in oat milk, and Hutcherson reads his lines in the preppy teenage snot voice that a lot of trust fund boys never lose even when they enter their 50s. When James' character gets worked up while denigrating Adam, he spits misty. Plumes of saliva. Irons is dressed and lit to exaggerate the royal rare look that made him so perfect in 1990s black comedies, psychosexual thrillers, and horror flicks. It's a real shame that The Beekeeper isn't the righteous trash masterpiece that it keeps threatening to turn into. There's a great pop hit in here somewhere, probably one that focused exclusively on Adam and the awful people he's going after, but the film is scattered and annoyingly glib at times. There's a well-acted but ultimately unnecessary secondary plot about Ello's FBI agent daughter Verona Parker Emmy Raver-Lampman and her partner Matt Y. Bobby Nady, who wants to catch Adam and put him in jail. Even though Verona's initial theory about his complicity is instantly proved wrong, it seems as if she should recognize him as more of a Dr. Richard Kimball type. The FBI duo has undeniable chemistry, but the buddy cop comedy riffing in their scenes undercuts Verona, who should be as furious about and focused on what happened to her mother, as Adam is worse politically and philosophically. The movie wimps out in the end in the way that a lot of vigilante action flicks wimp out, by reassuring us that the problem isn't systemic corruption baked into the national character or the human species, but a few bad apples doing bad stuff without their well-meaning boss's knowledge or approval. If there's any working actor who could literally as well as figuratively burn it all down and bring audiences to their feet, cheering at Statham, even the most socially critical Hollywood genre films tend to lose their nerve in this specific way, telling us that the problem is not systemic and purposeful corruption, but specific people whose removal will set things right again. Still at its best, which is when Statham dominates the screen shooting and Ming bad guys and setting gigantic fires. The Beekeeper is a work in the spirit of the original Billy Jack and Walking Tall. It's a fantasy about how satisfying it would be to punish the kinds of white-collar crooks who exploit and bully law-abiding citizens without fear of retribution. Watching The Beekeeper made me think about the many elderly people in my life who have been victimized by scam artists, the state predators and other swindlers, and the police and court officers who refuse to lift even a pinky to help get justice for them, and how satisfying it would be for all of them to get into their cars, glance at their rearview mirrors, and see Jason Statham in the back seat. January Jason Statham action movie titled The Beekeeper comes with the weight of expectations. Beekeeper must have a double meaning. The movie must be littered with tongue-in-cheek bee puns and references. The action must be fun and creative, ideally with bee-centered hinks and above. All the movie must be ridiculous, but with a straight face that hides the knowing wink behind the curtain. I enjoyed the movie when I first watched it, but it has grown on me since like honey in a comb. Yes, some of the major plot points don't make a lick of sense, including the character death that sets the whole plot into motion. And half of the cast isn't quite on the same level of tongue-in-cheek action fun as Statham and Jeremy Irons dutifully, following Michael Nick Fist's example from John Wick, as guy who tells the petulant villain how extremely he is. But if you're looking for breezy January genre fare, you could do a lot worse. The basic premise: Pitt Stam's Adam, Clay, a retired badass living a life of quiet beekeeping against an evil call center who scammed someone he cares deeply about. As Clay investigates and destroys those responsible for he uncovers a deep conspiracy, and more people to destroy the Beekeeper opens with a credit sequence filled with bee imagery, bee footage, art, and more. And on first appearance, Clay is in full beekeeping get-up that should prepare you for the onslaught of bee quips and references to come. More than bee humor, the fight scenes are great, designed by action maestro Jeremy Marina's John Wick Chapter 4, and making great use of props to keep the combat fresh. The first major action sequence is in a call center where Statham uses phones, keyboards, computer monitors, and anything else he can get his hands on to beat up the scammers and their security. Team Marinas and director David A. End of Watch film the sequence well, creating clear visual lines so the audience can follow the action, and using sharp editing to bring out the full force of the impact. Statham is his reliable self, mixing his effortless growth, rough charm, with his comedy chops to help sell the ridiculous lines he has to deliver. And the movie looks great. And cinematographer Gabriel Beristain cleverly infused the visuals with a yellow-amber color. Title and the vibe often making you feel like you're watching the movie from inside a honeycomb. The villains are also cheeky over the top, adding to the Beekeeper's overall atmosphere, working for brash tech bro Derek Danforth Josh Hutcherson, son of the UZID president Gemma Redgrave, the call center crew kind of blends the Wolf of Wall Street's Jordan Bort with an evangelical pastor adding a dash of Die Hard's cocaine. Snorting scumbag Hay Ellis, they wear garish suits, high-five each other after. Stealing from old people, and generally behave like a fraternity that was given billions of dollars to commit crimes. This makes Clay's vengeance on them all the more entertaining. The Beekeeper excels in channeling Statham's ability to effortless lie-deliver lines like "you sound young, I bet you don't have a state," planning, or the endless bee references noted above. He's one of the few people on the planet who can make such things. Sounds simultaneously funny and terrifying, and the movie likely wouldn't work without him, or frankly wouldn't have gotten made without his participation. Plenty doesn't work about The Beekeeper when I first watched it. The shoddy plotting, the event that motivates Statham's revenge, does not really stand up under much scrutiny, and a boring FBI B-plot with the Umbrella Academy's Emmy Raver-Lampman held back some of my enjoyment. Raver-Lampman plays Agent Verona Parker, the daughter of the scam victim Statham is avenging. Her character is placed in the familiar position of an officer of the state, hunting down the man doing the thing she wishes she could be doing, in this case avenging her mom. Unfortunately, this element of the movie is derivative of better versions of this storyline. Her relationship with her mother is thinly sketched, and we don't see much of her angst over her difficult position. A very slight spoiler, since this happens early. In the movie, the plot kickstarting death I mentioned earlier is the suicide of Aloe Parker Fichia. Rashad, a sweet old lady, renting a room to the beekeeping Clay. When the call center scammers rob her and her charity of everything, she instantly takes her own life. No call to either of her loving children, no plea to Clay or the authorities for help. It lessens the impact of the revenge story by cheapening both Clay's and Agent Parker's relationships to Elo, and the vengeance would have been just as righteous if she had simply been scammed. But the movie improves with distance, days later. I mostly remember the good times. The Beekeeper offers Jason Statham, beating on fools who deserve beating, bringing the pain in exciting and inventive ways, all while delivering bee-themed one-liners sometimes. That's all you want from a bee movie. Other information about this film. The Beekeeper is the best kind of bad movie, which is to say it's the sort that puts entertainment ahead of pretentiousness, embracing the laughter sure to accompany such an unapologetically stupid, ultra-violent premise starring Jason Statham in what feels like a parody of Jason Statham movies. This conspiracy-fueled action showcase tortures its central metaphor until it can only be seen as a joke, featuring the transporter. Star as ruthless retired government assassin turned benevolent beekeeper Adam Clay, who's pushed back into berserker mode after a fishing attack targets the kindly old woman from whom he rents a barn. If you don't get a hearty belly laugh out of watching Statham scowl his way through the opening montage, in which Clay is shown collecting honey and tending his hives on a Buick country estate, while landlady Elo Fichia Rashad falls for a blatantly fishy online scam, then The Beekeeper is probably not for you. Saddled with a ludicrous but never less than hilarious script, director David puts fun ahead of plausibility, treating the Clay character as the ultimate enforcer anytime America's imperfect system of checks and balances needs adjustment. From the stylish opening credits sequence, in which close-up footage of healthy honeybees is unsettling views of ominous six-sided buildings with one random octagon thrown in for no good reason, the movie plants the Da Vinci Code, like notion that a shadow organization known as the Beekeepers has been tasked with protecting society from corruption. That's an awful lot to ask people to infer from a montage, though Ayer mostly just wants to rev up our imaginations, judging by the quick, nearly subliminal shot of an American flag superimposed on an active beehive. Are the Beekeepers supposed to be an Illuminati, ancient line of enforcers, or a more recent addition to the country's national security apparatus? And why are nearly all the major roles in this America-centric thriller, including that of U.S. President played by English actors? These are the wrong kinds of questions to be asking. To be or not to be taunts one character by way of alternative. The Beekeeper expects audiences to accept the claim that the top-secret Team Clay once worked for is above the pay grade of former CIA honcho Wallace West W. Jeremy Ayer, a vaguely George H.W. Bush-like figure, if only Bush had been British, sworn to protect torpy tech pirate Derek Danforth. Josh Hutcherson enjoying his role as the country's most entitled rich kid. The movie doesn't introduce these upper-level antagonists. Roch, the call center responsible for driving poor Ello to suicide, Ello's daughter Verona Emmy Raver-Lampman works for the FBI, but traditional law enforcement is inexplicably useless in a case like this. The culprit, David Witz, is a douchebag who operates out of a neon-lit boiler room hidden in a nondescript office building relying on his old Beekeeper network for a lead. Clay rolls up calmly, informs the security guards that he intends to burn the place to the ground, and proceeds to do exactly that. His directness, coupled with a vain attempt to saving the drones working the phone lines, comes across as chivalrous in the face of such dishonorable behavior. There's much talk of kicking the hornet's nest and protecting the hive. Never mind that bees and hornets are separate species entirely, as Clay traces the culprits responsible for draining ELO's accounts as far up the chain as necessary, which in EY and screenwriter Kurt Weir's overactive imaginations reaches all the way to the White House, depending on your appetite for cockamamie. Conspiracy theories that conceit is either the dumbest or most brilliant thing about the Beekeeper engineered in such a way that partisan American audiences can indulge their distrust of recent US leaders. The movie features characters who could be variously interpreted as proxies for Bush, Hillary Clinton, Hunter Biden, and the Trump clan. Meanwhile, Statham sticks to his brand, playing yet another variation on the bald-headed battering ram we've come to associate with the star. It's more than a little absurd that a cold-blooded killer would turn and his kill whomever you please Beekeeper status to keep bees. How many ex-Navy SEALs have dedicated themselves to raising seals? And yet such half-brained plotting is meant to suggest that Ayer and company don't find it necessary to waste their energy on backstory or psychology. The Beekeeper arrives in a post-John Wick world where a dead pet can trigger a killing spree. That style first franchise feels like a direct reference to the movie's most over-the-top action scene, in which even crazier successor played by Megan Lee in high heels and a shimmery pink trench coat opens fire on a gas station. It does a more than decent job directing the action scenes, which is what matters most with such a witless genre. Entry squads of goons carrying enormous guns line up for Statham to take on one at a time, once he's decided to protect the hive, but oddly not its queen. President Clay has no qualms about killing whoever steps in his way, whether it's the pros who answered to CIA honcho Janet Harward, British actor Minnie Driver, or a grizzled mercenary like Lazarus Taylor James, who's off a Beekeeper before and relishes the thought of swatting another. We're meant to be rooting for Statham's bug-brained vigilante, and yet by the film's climax in which he bursts in on the American president with gun drawn, it's hard not to be reminded of the scene 3 years and 6 days earlier, when self-appointed heroes from groups called the Proud Bow Boys and Oath Keepers violently took matters into their own hands. Maybe trusting the fate of our democracy to a renegade Beekeeper isn't the ideal solution. This movie would have us believe. Here's the beautiful thing about David Ayer, the Beekeeper, which is essentially a John Wick ripoff, starring Jason Statham as a former top-secret government assassin who violently unretires after someone kills his bees. If for some twisted reason you showed me this movie right after I'd woken up from a 10-year coma and told me it was opening in theaters that Friday, I might not have any idea what year I was in, but I would know within 5 minutes and beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was the second weekend of January. Too silly for late August, too memorable for streaming. Statham only has about 12 lines in this film, and one of them is, "I'd like to thank you for putting up with me and my bees," and so committed to its own stupidity that it starts to feel like smart counter-program for prestige fare. Like Poor Things and American Fiction, The Beekeeper could reorient a lost critic to their current place in the film calendar as reliably as the North Star might point a wayward sailor back to port for me. There's a strange comfort in that for you. Well, there's a phenomenal scene in which Statham kills the world's most annoying henchman by tethering him to a pickup truck and then launching the truck off a bridge at full speed by February that might not be enough to move the needle. And the audacity of the big plot reveal that it tees up a truly delightful bit of world building that I wouldn't dare spoil. Here might come off as more low rent than high risk on the first anniversary of Gerard Butler's plane. However, it almost feels like flying, to be clear. The Beekeeper is no plane. It's not even a Kandahar. Those movies had a certain degree of narrative integrity. This movie doesn't it, doesn't have it, doesn't want it, doesn't need it. What this movie has, courtesy of Kurt, Where's Upwardly Mobile? Script is a rickety ladder that it climbs from comically low stakes up to the highest levels of power. The first step, an inciting incident that unfolds with all the dramatic credibility of a Life Alert commercial. As a widowed Massachusetts schoolteacher played by Fishy Rashad falls prey to a phishing scam so obvious that even a lonely old woman should know better. Her name is Ello, and she clicks on a virus alert that connects her to the Jordan Bort of malware David Witts as Boyd, with whom she immediately shares all of her financial data after Boyd and his call center goons zero out all of Elo's accounts, including the $2 million she controls for a children's charity. Alo, naturally, follows through on the various fraud alerts that flood her phone and then calls her lawyer for next steps. Just kidding, this sweet old lady immediately pulls out a handgun and shoots herself in the head anyway. None of this sits well with Adam Clay Stam, the soft-spoken beekeeper who leases Elo's shed and talks exclusively in bee-related metaphors. When someone kicks his nest, Adam stings back without any regard for his own life. You see, Adam isn't just a beekeeper. He used to be the Beekeeper, a top-secret extra government agent whose job is to save the colony from anything it deems a threat. And I do mean anything at Adams. Just a civilian now. But it's hard to completely divest oneself of a moral code that used to keep an entire country in check, and so he can't help but trace the phishing attack back to its source. It takes him about 3 seconds to find the people responsible, and then another 3 seconds to burn their entire operation to the ground. The bad guys escalate from rent-a-cops to SWAT teams over the course of the movie, but I don't think Statham takes so much as a punch until the last fight. It could have ended there. But boy, eating child boss Derek Danforth, Josh Hutcherson, channeling Jake Paul, orders him to go after Adam, and then Boyd orders his goons to blast Adam's beehives with a shotgun. And then, Adam's thinking he's back from there. The rest of the movie effectively follows Adam as he kills his way up the food chain in pursuit of Derek, but the Beekeeper does its best to overcomplicate things in the hopes of churning its nonsense into a coherent meth mythology. Jeremy Irons' character adds nothing to the movie but an exasperated hint of credibility, while Minnie Driver shows up for a two-scene role that strains to connect the dots between local issues and national politics. The real problem here starts roughly disposable part of Special Agent Verona Parker, an FBI desk jockey who just so happens to be the late Ello's daughter, played by Hamilton actress Emmy Raver-Lampman, oddly toned, deaf in a sarcastic FC performance that makes Verona seem oblivious to the fact that her mother just shot herself in the head. Verona and her partner Y. Bobby Nati, as the family man in Over His Head, act as the audience's entry point into this story as they stay on Adam's heels and learn about his classified existence. The confusion baked into their Rosencrantz and Guildenstern-like adventures often serves to reinforce how little sense any of the world building makes, none of it dumber or more derivative than Adam's ENC counter with the current Beekeeper Megan Le, a minigun-wielding lunatic who dresses like Jubilee and shoots like Rambo. Aren't the Beekeepers supposed to be subtle and righteous? Forget being a good person. Adam's replacement isn't even a decent shot. Like most of the action scenes here, the gas station fight between the Beekeepers is short and chaotic, and it ends without Stom so much as flinching. The ever-grimacing Stom has a strict one facial expression per career rule, and it has no interest in violating the terms of his lead actor's contract. His decision to enlist Jeremy Marinez and his stunt team from 8711 only adds to the off-brand John Wick of it all, though. And Wimmer gets some real mileage from the decision to lean into Adam's invincibility at every turn. The question isn't, will anyone stop him, so much as it's when will he stop? and the unremarkable action choreography is often redeemed by the she-p ridiculousness of the situations in which it's deployed. It's a shame that the morality of Adam's mission is such a poor fit for the gruesomeness of his best kills. There is a great bit of ultra-violence in an elevator towards the end, and the Beekeeper too. Blood and honey would be wise to let Statham go full Jigsaw and just destroy bad guys in the goriest way possible. This potential franchise starter is already running on fumes by the time Ayer is finally given the latitude to cut loose, though. I enjoyed the Hail Mary, like casting of London-born South Africa-raised dancing giant Taylor James as the whacked-out mercenary who shows up in the third act and gives Adam a run for his money. Be that as it may, there is plenty of squall potential for a movie about an unstoppable killing machine who's willing to threaten the world order in order to keep Western civilization from going further off the rails. The Beekeeper brings a vaguely radical energy to that idea, an energy that, if nurtured, could make this into a politically chaotic series that distances itself from its better-crafted peers on the strength of its go-for, broke irreverence on the strength of its pure January, more details every great idea that moves an art form forward inspires imitators who swim in its wake. And John Wick has more imitators than most. The second audiences started praising the type of fight choreography that allows the viewer to actually see what's going on. Every action movie treated us to grueling, lengthy combat scenes shot at wide angles with every landed punch in the center of the frame. Others aped bits of the Wick, mythos-building worlds of lore for their main characters, often members of secret fighting societies, often retired, and their enemies, usually mobsters or hitman, possessed with terrifying knowledge of a certain martial art. The Beekeeper, directed by David Ayer and starring Jason Statham, is the latest of these copycats, posing the intriguing question, what if John Wick, but with B's Statham, plays Adam Clay, a quiet, soft-spoken man living in the New England countryside? He keeps to himself, but makes an exception for a Low Parker, Fisher Rashad, an elderly woman who lives in an isolated farmhouse. They share one exposition-laden conversation. But you can tell they're friends. If there's one thing Statham's going to do, it's charm. Every veteran actress he's cast opposite Clay keeps. Bees housing them in hives on the side of the road and extracting and jarring the honey in Ayer's shed one evening when, delivering a jar of said honey to A's after collecting a bunch of bee-killing hornets in a bag and electrocuting them, Clay finds her dead on the floor of her living room, having committed suicide after a shady company conned her out of her savings. Things escalate from here. Gone is the hazy farmhouse, the rolling upstate hill. FBI agent Verona Parker, Emmy Raver-Lampman, is on the case, but her jurisdiction only goes so far. It's up to Clay to go rogue, hunting down those responsible for his friend's death and blowing up their neon-tinged call centers. Shockingly, a beekeeper played by Jason Statham is not just a beekeeper. He was once a capital B beekeeper. Beekeeper, one character asks breathlessly, a member of a top-secret organization of special age, operate above the law when the law is not enough, as you might expect. The rest of the movie is Adam Clay punching and shooting and exploding his way to the top of the fishing conspiracy, taking out goons and sawing fingers off of sniveling phone scammers while grunting lines like, I protect the hive and I'm gonna burn you down. His lengthiest piece of dialogue is a long diatribe about the evils of organizations that financially prey on elderly people. So as far as any viewer is concerned, his actions are completely justified. There's enough over-the-top action and dialogue in the script by Expendable 3E's writer Kurt Wimmer to keep things entertaining. There's also a bit of fun world building. Clay calls into a headquarters where chat bubbles show up as little honeycomb hexagons, and the way certain characters talk about beekeepers, it's clear they've run up against a formidable foe. When a beekeeper says you're going to die, one character explains you're going to die. Even Staff's everyday beekeeping outfit looks like tactical gear with a tailored fit and a series of buckles on the side, reminiscent of body armor. Many things, however, are unclear. How high up in the government do you have to be to know about an organization like this? Is there an international branch, or is it only under American jurisdiction are other beekeepers? So literal with their recreational pursuits, there's not a ton of room for details. The story bounces between Clay's rampage to Verona's detective work as she toils to uncover the secrets behind Clay's past, while the true villains, a greedy, foul-mouthed tech bro named Derek Josh Hutcherson, and his protector, former CIA Director Wallace West Jeremy Irons, doing a meaner version of his Alfred Pennyworth, mobilize a defense against the oncoming Beekeeper onslaught, being a David A. action movie. The film is mainly concerned with the violent aspects of bees and beekeeping, Clay obsession with real-world phenomenon wherein a regular worker bee can become a queen slayer to protect the genetic future of her hive. There's not a lot of curiosity about the insects beyond that point. In fact, when one character mentions an interesting bee fact she just read, she's told to pipe down the bees as a motif are functional, to a point like the beekeeper's reliance on the absurdist wiki and tropes they're in there, because they need to be, according to the current model of action movie making. That said, it's not a good time. If all you want to see is a classic Stan beatdown with flashes of inspired pizzazz, the supporting cast is all good. If a little too heavily reliant on profanity, laden dialogue, we get it. You're all upset. Taylor James of Vikings Bala gets a particularly memorable third-act intro as the most evil South African henchman you've ever seen, with frosted tips at a certain point. So many people are yelling and shooting and punching at each other that it's difficult to remember why they're all mad, and a shocking twist near the end of the film only serves to confuse even more, where the inner workings of a beehive are ordered chaos. The beekeeper is just chaos with Jason Statham in a stinger-proof jacket, barely holding it all together. You can add the beekeeper to the list of action movies named for the jobs their protagonists took up after laying down their weapons and trying to live a peaceful life. In my review of The Bricklayer, actually Adam Clay, Jason Statham, Meg 2, The Trench, Fast and Furious presence. Hobbs and Shaw always was a beekeeper. That was the name of the elite unit he was a part of, before he retired to actually raise bees. He does this on a farm owned by a L. Parker, Felicia Rashad, Creed Empire, somewhere in a very confused part of England that wants us to believe it's actually Western Massachusetts ELO, who's supposed to be a retired teacher and should know better. Falls for one of those computer scams that says you have a virus and to call this number to have it removed. As a result, she gets not only her bank account, but the one she manages. For a charity looted out of shame for being such an idiot, she kills herself. This scene, while meant to be serious, is actually laugh-out-loud funny, as we see the film's villain, Derek Danforth, Josh Hutcherson, Five Nights at Freddy's, The Hunger Games, strutting around his high-tech call center, complete with a huge display showing how much they're stealing from each victim. He personally performs the scam, exhorting the woman to enter her banking info, like a televangelist telling the faithful to send their donations. It's so ludicrously over the top and removed from reality. All you can do is laugh. It's also not the only time the beekeeper will go there. Clay finds her body and, of course, initially get blamed for her death, especially by the victim's daughter, FBI agent Verona Parker, Emmy Raver-Lampman, the Umbrella Academy blind-spotting, who was such a loving and concerned daughter. She never knew her mother had leased out. Part of the farm, once cleared of her death, Clay swears revenge. But that gets tricky because Derek's mother, Gemma Redgrave, the relief of Bison Dream Demon, happens to be the president of the United States of America. Director David Ayer sabotaged the tax collector, and writer Kurt Wimmer, expend for Bless Equilibrium, have put together a film whose entertainment value will probably depend on how much disbelief you can suspend. Because even for an action film, The Beekeeper has an incredible disregard for reality that includes a climax that sees Statham invading a presidential function and laying waste to what seems to be the entire Secret Service to get at his target. Then he simply jumps out a window and is allowed to leisurely make his escape. No, that's not a spoiler. Did you actually think he wouldn't get his revenge, or that there wouldn't be a setup for a sequel? Statham can play roles like this in his sleep, and time between bursts of well-choreographed mayhem from his double Tom Connolly Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom F9. The Fast Saga and the rest of a stunt team that has almost as many members as the film's cast. The rest of the cast also seem to be going through the motions here, with even Minnie Driver Goodwill hunting the Witcher blood. Origin phoning it in, the exception is Jeremy Irons' Dead Ringers, Kafka, who goes in the other direction, hamming it up as a former CIA director now working for President Danforth, graded just on give or take a crappy CGI explosion to keep it from getting dull, unfortunately. Just about everything else in this film is a mess. Thanks to Ware's worst script since Ultraviolet, he seems to have put more effort into coming up with B-jokes than making anything in the plot believable. Unfortunately, it is all too believable that the studio thought it was worth a 7-fig payout. If you just want to see Statham take out a phone. Scamming outfit, which is nice to see, then The Beekeeper may give you a buzz. If you're looking for anything else worthwhile, you're likely to get stung. This film, directed by David A., written by Kurt Wimmer, produced by Bill Block, David Ayer, Chris Long, Jason Statham, C.T. Wim. Starring Jason Statham, Emmy Raver-Lampman, Josh Hutcherson, Bobby Neary, Minnie Driver, Felicia Rashad, Jeremy Irons. Cinematography, Gabriel Beristain. Edited by Jeffrey O'Brien. Music by Bab Sardi. Jared Michael Fry Production Companies. Miramax, Cedar Park Studios, Punch Palace Productions. Distributed by Metro-Goldwyn. Mayer release date January 12, 2024. Running time 105 minutes. Country United. States language English. So guys, this is the review of the Beekeeper movie and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget